Now we're going back in time a little bit, and you will listen to House of the Rising Sun.
House of the Rising Sun? Like the folk song?
Yeah, the old folk song.
So who's doing it?
Well, you will read about it.
Okay, well hold on. I want to bring something in because I actually know this tune. So this is what I want to show you because, well, I understand. If I'm listening to the House of the Rising Sun, then that is a well-known folk song, and obviously it's going to be a rock style rendition of it. But here's something kind of fun. This little book is called Baroque Folk, and I use it with my piano students. And it takes traditional, fairly well-known folk tunes like the British Grenadiers, the Ash Grove, Old MacDonald, even Knick Knack Paddywhack, and presents them musically in Baroque compositional style. So we have everything from two-part inventions to minuets and a Baroque suite that uses the allemande, the courante, the sarabande, and so on. And at the end of the book, there's a passacaglia, a Baroque-style passacaglia using the House of the Rising Sun. So this is going to be entertaining to me because already I am used to seeing, hearing this piece and even teaching this piece presented in multiple different styles, but never a rock style. Maybe just to start off, I should play the opening lines of the way it's done in this Baroque style. A passacaglia is a type of music which is built off of the same recurring bass line over and over, while variations are done in the upper parts. Kind of like a canon or a chaconne. I understand that the recording I'm going to be listening to is a fairly significant, well-known recording, and I'd like you to hear it in a different style, and then we can talk about the differences along the way. Well, this was arranged for piano, but I'm going to play it on the harp. Now, the passacaglia, as I said, is a form of music which has the same recurring bass line, and you will hear this tune used as the bass line in this arrangement. And then it goes on, and you hear the same bass line, and the right hand becomes increasingly varied every time it repeats. Maybe I should do a full recording of it for you. But first, let's see what band is going to be presenting this, because I don't even know yet. The Animals. The Animals. Okay, I guess I've heard that name, at least read that name in all the comments recommending different bands. The Animals, also billed as Eric Burden and the Animals, are an English rock band formed in Newcastle upon Tyne in the early 1960s. Okay, so this is early 60s, around about the time of the Beatles, right? The Animals were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994. On the 15th of March 2012, in a keynote speech to an audience at the South by Southwest Music Festival, Bruce Springsteen discussed the Animals' influence on his music at length, stating, "To me, the Animals were a revelation. They were the first records with full-blown class consciousness that I'd ever heard." That's interesting. House of the Rising Sun was a transatlantic hit. After reaching the top of the UK pop singles chart in July 1964, it topped the US pop singles chart 2 months later. And on September 5, 1964, where it stayed for 3 weeks. Oh, that's when it topped the US pop singles chart. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. I'm just reading this for the first time. Many cite this as the first true classic rock song and became the first British invasion #1 unconnected with the Beatles. Okay, right. 1964 was... was that A Hard Day's Night released in 1964?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, round about the same. This is going to be interesting to compare between what I've been doing with the Beatles and now this band, and then of course the whole idea of it being a folk melody, which has been around for a long time on both sides of the pond, as I understand, because there's a fair bit of debate about whether the origins of this tune are British or American. We'll leave that to the music scholars to discuss endlessly, but let's dive in here.
There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. In God, I know I'm one.
It's interesting comparing already the two versions because, of course, I know this melody, and what we just heard, what I just played on the harp, was the melody being presented by the bass line. And here in this Animals rendition, it's not the bass line playing the melody, but still it's the voices in the lower range, at least in this first verse. And we hear the same type of strumming, arpeggiated pattern built circling around the melody. It's just an interesting commonality between the two.
I'm one. My father was a tailor, sewed my new blue jeans. My father was a gambling man down in New Orleans.
And I'm also comparing the sound to the Beatles. And they have more... the Animals, not the Beatles, the Animals, have a fuller bass register. The Beatles have more, at least in this time period of the Beatles, they had a more of a pointed edge to their arranging, to their voices, but also the instruments. It was more, should I say, nasally, pointy. And here, it's a little bit more mellow in the whole instrumental mix sound.
down
chugging along like.
Oh, mother, tell your children.
I like the voice. It's an appealing, nice kind of folk style voice to my ears. And this has very much of a folk music quality to it, even though it has kind of the rock style elements included, but they aren't really heavily applied. I guess the thing that stands out most to me is the bass as being very prominent here. The upper registers are at a lower volume. They kind of just blend into the texture. And then, of course, the drums are just chink, 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 carrying us along as well. But it's mostly an accompaniment fabric, textured fabric, on which the voice is laid. At the same time, the voice isn't really strongly presented above all of that. It's more like it's laying within that fabric and the sound texture. And it's an interesting combination of where is our attention being pointed to sound-wise. Are we to be listening to the voice, which is kind of woven in between? Or are we to be listening to this texture and an accompaniment which is not extremely, should I say, unique, musically dynamic in its own right? It's very much serving a supportive role, even though it's so audible. It's an interesting mix, and I'm going to listen a bit more here.
Tell your children.
Oh, and this organ in here reminds me of some old story tapes that I grew up listening to, which had the same organ style sound dramatizing the narration of the story. And it kind of throws me back to my childhood because of that. Even though I never grew up listening to this kind of music, the organ sound, that sound is embedded in my childhood memory. And so this piece of music has a very nostalgic quality for me.
Oh, mother, tell your children not to do what I have done. Spend your lives in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun.
The guitar, yum da 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 dum bum 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 da 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 dum bum 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 diddy dee dum bum bum. It's blended so smoothly into the rest of it that it simply enhances the texture, and yet we feel it and we are subtly aware of it. I'm listening more to the voice.
I'm going back to New Orleans, to where that ball and chain
It's been a while since I have listened to a piece of rock style music that actually put an intentional, recognizable ritardando at the end, rather than a fade out. This one did just that. You see, it gradually put the brakes on the tempo rather than gradually diminishing or fading out the volume. And I didn't notice that that was missing until I just heard this. It's been quite a while. I don't know. When is the last rock piece I listened to that did that? I don't even remember. Anyway, interesting little detail. I'm thinking about my overall impressions of this piece, this rendition, this presentation. You know, it's kind of hard to take a well-known melody, like a folk song, that is embedded in the general cultural consciousness, and make it so identifiably your own, so recognizably your own, that it can go to the top of the charts, that it can become a big hit because everybody knows it anyway, and it can feel a bit just like a rehash of the same old thing. But I'm listening and I'm trying to think, what is it that makes this so appealing and so original in its presentation that it had such a big appeal? And my guess is that it has to do with the voice and the singing style, because it feels very much like he is telling the story of his life. He is saying, you know, he's telling it in this way that feels very authentic, very genuine, very much his own experience. And he's using his voice. It's singing, it's not storytelling, but his way of singing it is very much like he's telling a story. And the different shades of tonal variety that he brings in. Where does he get gentle? Where does he get a little bit, where does he let his voice break and get a bit rough? Where does he become more powerful in his voice? He's using all of his vocal powers, vocal techniques, capacities, to tell this story in a very compelling way. And we begin to feel sorry for the poor guy, because he's telling us how his life has been ruined, and he is warning others not to follow in his steps. But it's not just the rehashing of a folk song. It is him telling in his own way. I guess I want to listen to parts of it again, especially what struck me were when he would start the next verse. It felt very much like he was starting to tell the next part of the story. Just setting the stage. A bit like sitting around the campfire by the train tracks, and you're hearing some traveler tell how he ended up in this ne'er-do-well state. And he just starts by strumming away. And then here comes the story. And everybody sits back to listen.
There is a house in New Orleans. They call.
Notice how he starts with his mysterious voice. There is a house in New Orleans. And then he launches in a bit stronger.
There is a house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun. And it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. In God, I know I'm one.
You feel like you're listening to him.
My father was a tailor. Sewed my new blue jeans. My father was a gambling man down in New Orleans. Now the only thing a gambler needs is a suitcase and chub. And the only time he's satisfied is when he's on a drum.
This image of sitting in a camp near the train tracks sort of thing is growing in my mind. And this, it's not just telling a story. It's a performance. He is singing to tell his companions as well. And it's a sort of entertainment night. And they're just passing the time there because they're waiting to catch their next ride to who knows where, right? But this whole presentation of this, to me, fits that scenario. And at the same time, it draws you in. And I guess that must be why, at least one of the big reasons it became so popular. What did it say? Topped the US pop singles chart and the UK pop singles chart. And stayed there for 3 weeks. And also the fact that it became the first British invasion #1 unconnected with the Beatles. And this is not the Beatles sound, although I hear similarities in the development level of the music, right? But it's an incredible thing that the Animals could take this tune, this melody, which so many people already know, and make it so attractive that it would fly to the top of the charts. That's pretty impressive. And I do feel a sort of pull into the musical experience, mostly because of the storytelling of the voice. I'm listening to the background, I'm listening to the accompaniment, and to me it feels primarily just that, an accompaniment. Something on which the voice rests. Great song, great rendition of a song. And as I said, this is impressive, the fact that they've been able to kind of revitalize this old melody and make it appeal to not only the British, but also the American audience, and to do it so successfully. And I liked it. It has a soulful, melancholy, and at the same time, traveling feel to it. It feels like a traveling song to me. Maybe it would go on a playlist of mine for when I'm driving down the road and just need something to listen to in the background. Don't forget that, well, I don't know exactly when this video is going to go public, but as it is right now, it's just about a month until we reach the 1-year anniversary of the channel when I first posted my very first video. And we're also getting close to 100,000 subscribers, and I don't know if how the two will join up, but it would be great if we could have a celebration of both at the same time. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share, kind of help me along, see if I can reach this goal soon. And if you want to support my journey further, you can always check out my Ko-fi and Patreon pages and see what there is there that appeals to you as well. Also, keep your eyes open for a harp rendition of this, because it's been a long time since I thought about this as anything other than a piece that I would teach a student to teach them some compositional ideas and stylistic skills. But I kind of enjoyed playing it on the harp, so maybe I'll do that for you and put it out soon. I'll see you next time.